Hey everyone, welcome back to Doodling with Purpose, the internet's only free week-to-week guide to learning ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics. You probably know that by now because, we're up to episode 176, so, hopefully you've been hearing this message before. All right, the last few weeks we've been talking about pronouns, and there's three different types of pronouns. We've been looking at the first type, suffix pronouns, which are the most common, and then dependent pronouns, which are dependent on the suffix pronoun. Well, I guess they're dependent on the verb. All right, and you've been either making flashcards or writing these down. We've been talking about the different ways both suffix and dependent pronouns are used, and in particular, dependent pronouns. The second way they're used is after a negative, meaning a phrase that means no or never or not. So we need to talk about the negative sign. Yep, that's this one. It means to not do something. It's two arms shrugging is what you're looking at here. All right, so let's take our verb to hear, common verb or hears. And now we're going to put the N mark after it, which you remember is like an ED, making it heard. And then we'll put a suffix pronoun, him. So he heard, because we've added the ED, the N mark, the water sign, and the pronoun. Now, an auxiliary that usually comes from the past is the root, the reed, and the chick, which is IW. This is an auxiliary, which means someone in the past did something. It's your stop sign to tell you that the phrase you're going into is going to be in the past tense, along with other elements. All right, so if we know IW, ew, before is he heard, what if we put the shrugging shoulders in its place, which means to not do something, right? You remember that? See how it's kind of shrugging shoulders? All right. So these are two different auxiliaries which can go before a phrase to tell you that you're about to go into, in this case, a negative or a past phrase. So by putting the negative, the shrugging shoulders glyph, in front where you would normally put a different auxiliary, like the past one, well, now this becomes he had not heard. Had not heard instead of he heard, because the negative mark in front of the sentence lets you know that you are going into a negative. It's kind of like in Spanish how you get the upside down question mark before a inquiry. So you can see the not comes from the shrugging shoulders. The ED, the here, becomes heard, past tense, because of the N mark. All right, but it's not as easy as that, because there's actually a reversal. You can't just throw a negative in front of a sentence. You have to know what tense you're in, past, present, or future. And unfortunately, it's kind of backwards because of this thing called Gunn's rule. And no, not the director of Guardians of the Galaxy or Suicide Squad. So Gunn figured out that the negative and the N mark for negative swap. So in the present tense, you get the ED, the N mark. But in the past tense, you don't. It seems like it should be the reverse, right? But it's not. It's just one of those things. And you have to remember that the normal ED for past in negative appears in the present tense, not the past tense. There's no N for that ED in past tense when you start with a negative. It's just a reversal. It feels like the natural thing would be for past tense to have that extra N and present tense not to, but it's reversed. Future tense takes the N mark and puts it under the auxiliary. So you get a double auxiliary, a negative and the ED, and this tells you that you're going into the negative future tense. So really you should look at the box here on the left, where you have negative, negative plus an N mark after the verb, negative plus the N before. So all of this rolls into using those dependent pronouns, because you can plop a dependent pronoun after the negative sign or the verb that is in a negative phrase because of the auxiliary. And that's one of the second ways dependent pronouns are used. The object of a verb and after the negative. So here we have our negative auxiliary telling us we're going into the negative, the verb to hear, the ED, the S, bolt of cloth, which is a suffix pronoun, and then we have a dependent pronoun for you at the end. That's where we've put our dependent pronoun. So if we break apart this whole sentence into all of the structure, we start with our auxiliary, and because we also see there's an N mark after the verb, normally this means we're in the past tense, but in negative it means we're in the present tense. It's weird, it's Gunn's rule, just live with it. Now we have our suffix pronoun. I wrote independent pronoun. No, it's a suffix pronoun. Excuse me. For she, and then the dependent pronoun for you, which makes it she did not hear you. Do you see how that works? Where the first pronoun is the object and the second one is dependent on that, hence dependent pronoun. So she did not hear you in the present tense. All right, so here's a couple negative phrases with some different verbs. For your homework, go ahead and transliterate and translate these into the proper tense based on where we have the end mark and where we have the negative auxiliary. All right, thank you so much for watching. We'll go through those next week, top of the lesson, and then continue on with some more suffix-dependent pronouns and then the final pronoun. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.